I call this regular meeting of the Finance Committee to order. And councilors, before we start with the agenda, real quick, we do have Mayor Sullivan with us and CFO Clarkson to talk about the ARPA money. They wanted to just come up and give you a brief update, as they said they were going to last year. So they wanted to come in and say something, so we figured we'd
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I know that you received this. I don't have my glasses, so I can't read it because it's pretty darn small. Going forward, we want to make it a larger font for you. But in essence, myself and the council president meet weekly. I had indicated to the council president, myself, and the CFO would like a resolve filed so we could come back the second FinCom in April. There's twofold reasons on that. Number one, as you know, I've set $2 million aside to help our nonprofits. We've had 45 people apply. The award date will be April 1st, and that's not an April Fool's joke. It will be April 1st. So that's reason number one. Number two, myself and Troy are flying down to Washington, D.C. to meet with Senator Markey, Senator Warren, and also Congressman Lynch. We have a meeting on the 6th and a meeting on the 7th, and we want to talk to them about the infrastructure money, the ARPA money, and then we'll be able to come back and report what they say. I will also tell you that we had a meeting last week with the Plymouth County Treasurer. As you know, we received $17 million last year when Congressman Lynch came, another $17 million this year. That's the $34 million ARPA money from the feds. We have a tranche from Plymouth County that we should be receiving as well. Our calculations, it should be about $18 million. County Treasurer believes it should be a lot lower, so we're kind of talking about that now. But that's another bit of the ARPA money from the feds going through Plymouth County. As you know, we did that similar with the CARES Act funds. We were awarded $18 million plus another $1 million. We have been made whole on that. The city of Brockton has received the full amount. I want to thank the president for driving to Plymouth 2 weeks ago when we received $1 million. But when you see this, and Troy can answer any questions you have as well, when you see this spreadsheet, I reviewed it today when I had my glasses with me, the amount of money that has been dispersed thus far does not meet the threshold of $750, other than the amounts that previously had been opined to you in the legislative body. Certain monies were used for contracts. I know Councilor Fowler had brought that up as well. Certain money had been utilized under ARPA for the renovation of the Campanelli Stadium. In terms of the other monies, the big three projects are the following, and not a penny's been spent relative to this yet. City Hall, we have to spend money on City Hall. We can't do a Band-Aid approach. Council on Aging, we expect about 1.5 to 1.6 million on Council on Aging, and the War Memorial Building, which is a building that we owe it to the veterans that served our nation, and make sure that that's a respectable building. We put out an RFP request to hire a clerk of the works or a consultant or liaison, whatever you want to call it, to help us with ARPA. We had one person apply. Good news is he is an expert in the field. Dan Pallotta, many of you know Dan Pallotta. He used to be a county commissioner. Dan meets with us here on a weekly basis. He meets with Jim Plouffe specifically because of building issues that we're going to be doing. The other big thing, and I've said it before, I'm going to say it again, I want to spend money on our parks, I want to spend money on our playgrounds, and I've already made a promise, the East Side Pool needs to have several $1 million put into that as well. For a lot of people, as you know, we all grew up in Brockton. That's the beach for many people here in Brockton. So we want to make sure that it's a pool that is something that is a showcase in the City of Champions. In terms of any additional monies, Troy can opine on that, but we made a promise, and I honor the promise. When we get to the 750 threshold, we want to come back and get approval. We have to get City Council approval. Legislative body has to approve that. But right now, the ARPA money is still a little bit in flux because we don't have a hard number. We should be getting a tranche of money from Beacon Hill as well. Delegation's been working diligently, Governor Baker, Lieutenant Governor as well. So if we look at it now, we are getting our federal money that we already have, the $17 million. We're getting another $17 million. That's our federal allotment. We will be receiving our Plymouth County allotment of ARPA as well. I believe it should be about $18 million based on population, based on the only fact that we're the only city in Plymouth County. And then the third tranche, I believe, should be from Beacon Hill. The additional monies we hear about, the infrastructure, Build Back Better, all that stuff, federal money, that's outside of ARPA, but we are actively looking to see, and that's why Troy and I are going to meet with Senators Markey, Warren, and Congressman Lynch, see exactly how much money, because as we've all talked about in this council, we need to spend money underground as well as above ground, and if we can subsidize that from the federal government, we will definitely do that. Last thing I want to just let you know, I want to give a shout out to Jasmine Bradshaw in my office, Paul Romano in Troy's office, and also Brady Winston in my office, because they have been the three people working diligently on that $2 million application process to help our nonprofits and our recognized 501c3s. $2 million is put aside. If we're going to spend more money on that, my view is this: I want to spread the money because I want to maximize. As we've talked about, this is historic. It's truly lifetime changing. We will never see this again as long as we're public servants. But with that being said, we also have to have a wide-eye approach. This is not reoccurring money, right? So we're going to get one shot. We want to spend it correctly. We also want to make sure that it maximizes the benefits for everybody in Brockton. So I can't read this because I'm old and I'm blind, but I know you can read it because you have better eyes than I do. But Mr. Clarkson is here to answer questions as well. And again, a formal resolve, as the president said, will be filed. We will be back with detailed analysis and who's getting what relative to the application process and the $2 million. And again, that would be the second FinCom in April. Thank you very much.
Councilors, I've already talked to Shannon Resnick about the results, so we'll have that set up. I'll file that on behalf of the councilors. Any questions for the mayor or the CFO on this presentation? Councilor Thompson?
We'll let
okay.
Troy go ahead. I mean, he's...
Thank you, Councilor, and thank you, Mr. President. Just very briefly to follow on with what the mayor said, just to describe for you what you're looking at here. This is actually was created as our record keeping for the United States Treasury. So this is the front spreadsheet for what is a pretty voluminous set of records that has all of the information on all of the money we've spent thus far. And again, just to follow on with what the mayor said, so the reason why it's formatted this way is because that allows us to be responsive to the reporting requirements of the Treasury. And as the mayor noted, we will be back before you next month. And at that point, we do anticipate having a detailed request before you that complies with your previous vote. So any initiatives that you see here that are in excess of $750,000 have an asterisk next to them, if you can see the asterisk. And that is because though we are planning to spend that money, but recognize the limits that you set, and we'll come back to you with what I call an omnibus request that will include the City Hall and the War Memorial and the Senior Center and the Parks and Playgrounds Initiative, but we'll have some more detail on those requests to discuss. So this is just an update of how we're keeping the records thus far, and I know we had committed to providing that brief update. So I'm happy to answer any questions on these specifics, but we really look forward to digging into the details with you next month on those particular initiatives.
Yeah, with a whole packet.
Yeah, exactly.
To this,
yeah.
Right, Councilor Thompson, followed by Councilor D'Agostino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Clarkson, for appearing tonight to discuss this important topic. I just want to take a few minutes to make my pitch. So the American Rescue Plan Act has granted the city of Brockton a once-in-a-generation opportunity to invest in our critical infrastructure needs. One of the areas ARPA allows for investment is our outdoor spaces, i.e. our public parks and public plazas. By investing in Brockton's outdoor spaces, we are responding to COVID-19's negative impacts to our city by promoting healthier environments and outdoor recreation and socialization. Multiple planning initiatives, including the Blueprint for Brockton, the Downtown Action Strategy, the 2021 Rapid Recovery Plan, and OCPC's SWOT survey, all identified public parks and open spaces as a top priority for land use improvements in Brockton's downtown district. That's why I believe the city of Brockton should prioritize the expenditure of ARPA funds for the construction of Sycamore Grove. For the public's knowledge, Sycamore Grove would be located behind the newly constructed unemployment building on Main Street. This is the old BAT terminal where Prova is now currently held. The current plans for Sycamore Grove provide for a music stage, a lawn seating area, a spacious room under planted trees and canopies where vendors could set up tables and booths for craft fairs and green markets and other events. And there will be lockable bathrooms and a vendor building for food preparation and also area for food trucks. Sycamore Grove will greatly enhance downtown Brockton by providing area for visitors to our downtown to rest and relax, and for residents to gather for civic events, to enjoy music, art, food, and other entertainment. And as Brockton's Ward 5 City Councilor, I am committed to realizing the potential of our downtown. And it is my belief that the construction of Sycamore Grove would be a catalyst to commercial development. It will also attract thousands of people throughout the year to gather, socialize, and spend money in our downtown. Now, to be sure, other investments are needed downtown, including Main Street two-way traffic, making downtown a more walkable area and provide a safe environment for all those who visit. But we have, as you stated, Mr. Mayor, a once-in-a-generation opportunity to make a significant and lasting impact in our city by using ARPA funds to develop Sycamore Grove. And so I'm hoping, I'm hoping through that pitch, Sycamore Grove will be considered for ARPA funds. I know you and me had a great conversation about this a few weeks ago, Mr. Mayor. At that time, you professed support for the Sycamore Grove project. So I was just wondering, would that fit in this year's allotment, next year's allotment, or, is the city still committed to expending ARPA funds for Sycamore Grove?
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Councilor. Number one, we will be spending money on Sycamore Grove. I think it's, like you said, a catalyst. It's extremely important. I also am committing money, and the wisdom of the City Council, we created a new street, Marvelous Marvin Hagler Way. Ted Carmen just closed on the building finally. And Jerry Cassidy, Rep. Cassidy, got $150,000 for Marvelous Marvin Hagler statue. I've already committed, and I've already told Rob May and Troy I want some ARPA money to be used on a pocket park down there to beautify where the statue's going to go. I will tell you that we will spend money on Sycamore Grove, but I'm also going to look everybody in the eye here and say every ward in the city of Brockton's parks and playgrounds, at some point, will have money. All 7 wards, not all 28 precincts, because not every precinct has a park or playground, but I will opine on that, and we will do that.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And remember, downtown Brockton beer opens April 1st, okay? So please remember that.
Thank you.
Be nice to drink a beer at Sycamore Grove in the
Yes,
future,
it would.
Mr. Mayor.
If you'll buy it.
Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilor D'Agostino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mayor, for being here, and Mr. Clarkson as well. My question's much quicker. You mentioned that there was some debate with the county as to how much of that money we should be getting. So it sounds like, if I understood right, our number's about 18 million. I was just curious, what is it they think we should be getting and why?
Yeah, I think their math down county is a little different than Brockton math, the way that I learned at Brockton High School. So I will tell you, I will tell you that they believe it should be about 8 to 10. I disagree with that, but we're doing it in a respectful way. Again, if the county hadn't gotten the CARES Act money, I will also say the city of Brockton would not have released and received 19 million from the Commonwealth. It just wouldn't happen. So we will continue to work. I will say the fact that we hired Dan Pilata to help us as an expert is great. He also worked many years with those colleagues down there as county commissioners. I also have a counselor as a member of the Plymouth County Advisory Board as well. So we'll get to where we need to be. I just believe that our numbers are drastically higher than theirs at this time. That's the caveat, at this time.
Well, hopefully we can close the delta between the two.
There will be. Yes, there will.
So, well, I appreciate your work on that. And also, you mentioned that there'll be investment in parks all over the city. And so I appreciate that as well, because I was thinking the same thing. There's a few green spaces in Ward 3 I'd love to see some work done on, so thank you.
Just one other thing, in terms of Sycamore, that's just another good example. The ARPA money's one tranche, but we can use infrastructure money for that as well. So that's another reason we want to advocate and lobby. I guess you can't use the word lobby anymore, but advocate with our federal delegation. Because again, Brockton being one of the largest in the Commonwealth, right? And both Mayor Farwell and Mayor Rodriguez know that we don't get anything unless we stay friends with the federal government. And so we will continue to do that.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry about that.
No problem. Thank you. Councilor Minichiello.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Clarkson. This really is a great opportunity, like Councilor Thompson said. But I just want to remind everyone that with respect to the city of Brockton, we are really enjoying an upheaval in terms of a positive upheaval in property values. Brockton is a hot commodity on the South Shore. They are finally realizing the train is coming through Brockton. And guess what? With the train, there are investors that are following the train tracks. That's what they're doing. They're following the train tracks. And Brockton is on the line and finally being realized to be the perfect location with regard to being close to Providence, Cape Cod, Boston. It's just a perfect location. However, we need to make sure that with new investment, we do not, we have to be mindful of what's going on downtown currently. People need to feel safe. The downtown needs to be clean. People, plenty of people and citizens of Brockton constantly say when they come downtown, underneath some of the bridges, underneath some of the streets, some of the park areas, there's concerns with regard to sanitary conditions. So new investment is excellent. We are on a trend to go and move Brockton to the next level. There's so much investment going on in Worcester, Quincy. We want to ride those trains. We want to be one of the best municipalities in this state. We have the potential because of our location and certainly the diversity and the strong will and the commitment of Brocktonians. Brocktonians love this city, and that's why we're all here. But we need to make sure what's in the city gets tended to. And with the new investment, let's just keep an eye on what we have going on now, and that is, making sure with new investment, people aren't coming downtown like appraisers who assess and give real numbers to the city of Brockton and see, underneath some of the spots, these real concerns. So I think that's a great project because it is the heart of the city, and that's really where people gather. That's the gathering place, the heart of the city. Come down for a concert. Come down, when the weather is good. Come down and, and get to know people and enjoy. But people want to feel safe, and people want clean streets. They want, they don't want this. They don't want the weeds growing in the sidewalks. I mean, plenty of citizens have said to me, Tom, keep it simple. Just keep the streets clean. What can we just do that? And people will be happy. And so this is great. This is a great opportunity for Brockton, but let's all just keep our eye on, the basics. Let's keep the streets clean. Let's get the weeds out of the sidewalks. Let's get the trash out from underneath the bridges. Let's maintain and bring Brockton to the next level. And this is a great time. So full support, but again, these are what the citizens are talking about. They want clean and safe streets, and there needs to be a little TLC to what we have currently.
Yeah,
for new investment.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, it's the broken windows theory, right? And perception's reality. I will tell you 3 positive things. Number one, we were chosen, Brockton was chosen to host the mayor's conference. The MMA chose Brockton, right? So there's going to be 30 mayors coming here on the 30th, number one. Number two, myself, the council president, Councilor Azak, were at an event in South Boston yesterday. I was the opportunity to speak to a lot of mayors, including Mayor Wu, and they said, what are you doing in Brockton? Like, you're there. I was able to do an op-ed in the Herald the other day. But with that being said, we have to ramp up. We want to clean, all of us are taxpayers, so we deserve to have a clean place here in the city of Brockton, right? So tomorrow morning at 9, Troy and I are meeting with another multi-million-dollar investor in opportunity zones. This gentleman's the real deal. But I agree with you, what you're saying. And with that being said, remember that because there'll be another request on the budget for another street sweeper to be acquired by the city of Brockton. So hopefully I'll have your support on that, Councilor. Since you are my councilor in Ward 1, Councilor.
I'm all for clean streets. I'm all for clean streets, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Nicastro.
Thank you. Good evening, gentlemen. I know this was supposed to be a short presentation. I'm feeling a little twitchy because Counselor Thompson had that beautiful pitch for Sycamore Grove prepared to give to you. I don't have a similar beautiful pitch for Ward 4 except to say, I will hound you. To use some of
You
these
say that in such a loving way, Counselor, you know? I don't consider it hounding. You're advocating for your constituencies.
positively, but I will
Yes.
hound you.
Yes, you will hound me.
And later this evening on our agenda, we'll be talking about quite a major investment in Ward 4.
That's correct.
And I'll tell you, I'm being hounded by so many residents in subdivisions in Ward 4 who they can't drive on their roads because their roads were inadequately constructed at the onset and are now just literally floating away with water that's under the roads. We need some infrastructure desperately in Ward 4 in the neighborhoods. And of course, we have at least one bridge that's bad too.
Absolutely.
That needs help. So I'll have details and facts and figures for you when you return in April, but please keep Ward 4 in your thoughts,
Absolutely.
because I do too.
And Ward 1, Ward 2, Ward 3, Ward 5,
Exactly.
6, 7, and 8.
Forget 7, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The at-larges as well.
Thank you, Counselor. As
Thank you,
a
Counselor.
point of order, I believe the count goes 6, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh, is that how? Oh, yeah, well, you're the president.
No, but I don't even have to say roads. You know roads. That's the big one. Councilors, if there's nothing else, I think.
One last thing, if I could, councilors, you know, and again, I can speak to Moses and Wynn, who served in that office. We are turning over every rock we can to find additional money for Brockton. And, you know, we don't go on these junkets or anything like that. We do it for a purpose. And so I spent a night down the Cape a couple months ago with a bunch of mayors. It was the MMA conference for mayors. And I was able to come back with a cybersecurity grant that the city of Brockton had never heard of before. And I wouldn't have heard of it had I not gone there. And we applied. Again, I want to thank Paul Armano and his team and Ted Medeiros and the IT, and we received that. So again, we are right now actively looking for electric vehicles as well here in Brockton. The BAT buses, I spoke to Mike Lambert the other day again. Mo and Wynn know when you're the mayor, you're also chair of the BAT Bus Corporation. So good things are happening in Brockton, but we also have to peel back the layers and address the other issues, you know, the crime. You know, there was a murder just recently we were speaking about, and there was another stabbing murder this weekend as well. And the homeless population, again, we have to deal with that, and we are. It's not going to happen overnight. I will tell you, Father Bills will be leaving downtown again, which will be a game changer for the area in Perkins Park. But I look forward to working with you and for you to make Brockton better for everybody. So thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Chairman,
Councilor Farwell.
if the mayor and Mr. Clarkson have concluded, I understand that Mr. Atkinson from the Parking Authority has a scheduling conflict tonight, and for that reason, I would like to make a motion that we take item number 9 next out of order.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. All in favor to take item 9 right now? All right. Madam Clerk, item number 9.
Ordered that the City Council accept the provisions of Chapter 44 SS 53F, half of the MGL establishing the Brockton Parking Authority as an enterprise fund effective fiscal year 2023. The enterprise fund will include the balance as of June 30th, 2022 in the following accounts: Parking Enforcement Revolving Fund, Parking Meters Reserved Fund, and Garage Revenue Reserve Fund. Invited, Eric Atkinson, Executive Director of Parking, and Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer.
Mr. Clarkson, how are you?
Well, Mr. President, thank you, and members of the council. I'll gladly provide an overview, and if you have any additional questions, Mr. Atkinson is indeed here, and as luck, perhaps fate would have it, my predecessor is here as well. So if you want to put him on the spot and ask any questions, I'm sure that he'd be happy to answer them. So when the Parking Authority was established, and I did provide all of you a copy of the enabling legislation, it spoke and it speaks fairly directly about the authority, the operational authority of the Parking Authority. It really is silent, or certainly doesn't speak a lot about the financial management of the Parking Authority. So the way the Parking Authority worked under Jay's tenure and has continued under my tenure is that there are a series of funds into which the revenue from the parking authority is deposited. And then on an annual basis, and I did provide you in an email a PDF of a sample, on an annual basis you also approve a revolving fund that that receives up to $250,000 that defrays the cost of the operation. One of the things that I've learned during my tenure here is that we could perhaps simplify how that financial operation is undertaken. And it's really become stark during the pandemic when the revenues were less than they had been in other years, potentially impacting the operations of the parking authority. So Tiff and I, working with the Department of Revenue and Anne Marie and other members of the financial team, have tried to think of ways that we could streamline those finances while maintaining the integrity of the parking authority as a standalone operation that's supported by its own revenues. And in working with the Department of Revenue, the conclusion that we reached together is that the establishment of an enterprise fund, similar to what we use for water, sewer, and our solid waste operations, and what we're also proposing to you tonight we establish for our stormwater operations, that we establish an enterprise fund. I believe that this option would simplify and streamline the accounting, but would in no way impact the operations of the parking authority, nor would it negatively impact their ability to use some of those funds for capital items. And because of the nature of an enterprise fund, it would also continue to provide a benefit to the general fund. And I know that was one of the questions that was raised. And let me say as an aside, or for benefit of the folks at home, a couple members of the council asked some very good detailed questions. I not only appreciate, but I think those types of questions before a meeting are helpful because it really allows us that have done some of the background work to answer some of those questions and give you additional information to review before the meeting. So let me dispel the notion that the establishment of an enterprise fund will in some way lessen the opportunity for the general fund to benefit. As you know, and I'll use the water enterprise as an example, we, as part of the annual process, when you approve the budgets for each of the enterprises, when you do that, you also take a vote to address what's called the indirect costs. So during the budget time, we allocate money from each enterprise back to the general fund for what I call the back office support. So my office and auditing and administrative support. So with the establishment of the parking authority as an enterprise fund, if we take the rough percentages of what water and sewer and refuse contribute back, in the first year of the parking enterprise, rough estimate I anticipate, the administrative fee back to the general fund will be somewhere in the neighborhood of $165,000, $166,000. Every year, you, as part of the budget approval process, will review that. So if the level of support from City Hall to the parking authority is significantly increased, we can revisit that number. If it's significantly decreased, we can reduce that number. The key, I think, the key advantage is that the additional funds will stay within the enterprise. So when the parking authority needs to conduct capital improvements or ongoing maintenance that's outside their budget or unanticipated, all it takes is a visit to the city council and you would then authorize the expenditure of what in an enterprise fund is called retained earnings to address those needs. So it really is an accounting upgrade, I would say, and an ability to streamline the finances, but the integrity of the parking authority in supporting its own operations through its own revenues will continue. So I did this afternoon send a pretty detailed email addressing some of the questions that were raised. And in that, I included that enabling act that I just provided you and an example of the revolving fund vote that you take every year. I think that should probably address the issues because we're establishing the enterprise fund. It is required that that initial request to establish it include a proposed budget. So included in your packet was the proposed budget for next year. That has been preliminarily reviewed with Mr. Atkinson. The final review of that budget will be with the mayor, and then, of course, we'll be filing that overall budget with you. So as with all the enterprises, the budget will be submitted to the city council for approval on an annual basis. So really, in the overall picture in terms of operations, very little will change. I think what will change and improve is the ability for us to track the revenue and the expenses and then accurately report it to you and to the members of the authority. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councilors? Councilor Farwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Clarkson, my apologies for sending those questions to you today. If I had been at the top of my game, I would have sent them to you last Friday, so you would have had a little more time to research. And because of the information that you've provided, as well as looking back through the budget book for FY 2022, let me see if I've got my head wrapped around this. You have revolving fund accounts now, and you gave us the balances as of today. Parking meter fees, $305,000, parking authority reserve, $553,000, and parking authority enforcement, $404,000 in round figures. That will grow probably by the end of the fiscal year, June 30th. So the first step is that we would take the balances in those accounts, combine them, and they would go into the parking authority enterprise account. Have I got that right?
That is correct.
Okay. And next in the budget book, what we do is we examine revenues from all sources, including revenues from enterprise accounts. We have parks and recreation, water and sewer. And so you would be appropriating money from the parking authority enterprise account to offset the operational and administrative costs of the parking authority.
That is correct,
And that would all go through council.
That, absolutely.
Okay, and then I know you said that we would legitimize administrative expenses that we would charge back. I take it at some point we would ask for, we would figure out the cost of health care benefits and others for employees, and that would be charged back to the revenues coming into the enterprise account?
That's correct. Actually, a couple of years ago, and this is done periodically, we actually brought in a consultant that did an analysis of each of the enterprises, calculating all of those costs, and that developed the current administrative reimbursement for water, sewer, and refuse. The 166 that I suggested to you today was based on those formulas, and I did a rough percentage of administrative fee to actual spending and estimated it for purposes of tonight's discussion. But moving forward, if you create both enterprises, they too will be subject to that detailed analysis so that we have real backup for that administrative fee.
The last comment, and by the way, I'm completely comfortable with this now. I can see why it would be advantageous for the city, ultimately advantageous for the general fund, because we will be offsetting some expenses now that perhaps we aren't. The one thing I found interesting is that apparently we're just about breaking even, though. We're spending in round figures $1 million for the parking authority, personal services, and ordinary maintenance. We're only bringing in, if the figures you submitted today are accurate, maybe a little over $1 million, and that surprised me. I thought the parking authority would be more of a revenue generator than it is, and maybe that's because our fees are low. I don't know.
Well, and I'm sure Eric would be happy to opine on this as well, but it fluctuates. I think that's one of the advantages to having an enterprise fund, because you have that cushion in the retained earnings. So in years past, you're absolutely right. The parking authority was a significant source of revenue. And I'm told way in the past, when the city was really struggling, the parking authority actually stepped up to the plate and helped the city to a greater degree. Much like many businesses, and the parking authority, like the water and the sewer, operate as a business, the pandemic had some real significant impacts on it, and it had impact on the parking authority revenues. So one of the advantages to forming this enterprise fund is that the revenues in excess of operational costs will stay within that fund. So in years that are lean, we can use that to offset some of the costs and try to keep the fees down as low as we can.
Well, again, thanks to you and your staff for getting the information out to us. I know a number of councilors have said that it was very beneficial, so thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilor D'Agostino?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Clarkson, thank you again for the time you spent today, putting information together for us ahead of tonight's meeting. I was just, and, again, maybe this is just because I'm still learning how things work on the city side here. But you said that one of the benefits is that we can basically get the administrative costs that the city bears from the parking authority back. So we're not able to do that now under the current structure of the accounts?
Well, it's the way it's set up with the revolving fund.
Right.
The revolving fund collects up to $250,000, and anything over that, as your order says, gets credited to the general fund. But it's not, I would say, as clean and specific. It's not, there's not a direct line between actual expenses and the money the city is able to realize. With an enterprise, when we do that calculation, you'll see the granular level of the calculations that we've conducted. In the water enterprise, it carries a portion of Pat Hill's salary. It reimburses us for that because the consultants come in and they'll sit down with Pat Hill and say, how much time do you spend on water? And so it's more specific and I think more realistic rather than it just sort of a chance encounter. If you raise more than the 250, then the money comes back. In this scenario, it's predictable.
Okay. It almost sounds like on the current way that it's set up, I mean, 250, what is that based on? It's almost sounds like an arbitrary number that we don't really know where that came from, and does it serve? All right, so this way we would be able to recover that on the general fund side. You also mentioned, and I didn't, the capital expenditures. For them to make capital expenditures, they would have to come before the council for approval on that. Is that not a thing that has to happen currently?
In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. It depends on the source of the funding.
Okay.
So in this case, at the end of June 30th of every year, much like we do with free cash, there's a snapshot of the enterprise fund. And revenues in excess of projected revenues and budgeted expenses that were not incurred form the basis of free cash, and the general fund form the basis of the retained earnings. Once those retained earnings get certified, they can be used for any proper municipal purpose. In fact, you'll see at your next Finance Committee meeting, a request was to spend $1.4 million in water retained earnings. The water retained earnings have just been certified by the state at $7.1 million. And so we're going to seek not to use all of that to balance the budget, but to use it for some capital purposes. So the process in this case would be, once that retained earnings get certified every year, any capital items that the parking authority has, they can then bring forth to you and request to spend that money out of retained earnings. Of course, the advantage to that is we're buying things with cash and not incurring principal and interest costs.
Right. All right. And my last question is there a downside?
I don't think so professionally. I mean, I cut my teeth in an enterprise fund. That's where I learned a lot of what I know in the town of Bourne. I was the finance manager for their enterprise fund. They operate a solid waste landfill. That was more than 20 years ago, and that enterprise fund is still returning more than $2 million a year back to the town of Bourne. So I have seen in my career the long-term benefits of something like this. And again, I think we've won an award in this city collectively for the level of transparency that we have in our budget, and I think this just enhances that effort to be transparent.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councilor Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, good evening, Mr. Clarkson. One quick question, it might be a silly one or not, but currently we have 3 different accounts: the parking enforcement, parking meters, and garage revenue. With the creation of the enterprise fund, we still going to delineate the revenue earned in those 3 separate categories, or we're still going to know what revenue is coming from those 3 separate categories? Is that correct?
First of all, Councilor, yes, there's never a silly question. And the answer to the question is yes, absolutely. Much like we do in the water, there's water fees, there's fines, there's the new user fee, and we track those revenues in those separate categories. They produce the overall revenue picture. We will track the revenues for the parking authority similar to that.
Understood. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Clarkson.
Thank you. Councilors, is there a motion?
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Appointment of Marcelin Ulysses of Brockton, Massachusetts, 02301 as a constable in the city of Brockton for a term of 3 years. Invited Marcelin Ulysses.
How are you?
Mr. Chair, as previously in our last council, I got to recuse myself from this matter.
How are you?
I'm fine. How you doing?
Good. Do you have anything you'd like to say to the councilors?
I would like to say thank you with everyone to invite me here today. And then I would like to be here too.
Motion to recommend favorably back to the full city council.
Second. Thank you.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. We'll have a final vote next week.
Thank you.
Then you should be all set.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appointment of Ednil Sannon of Brockton, Massachusetts, 02301 as a constable in the city of Brockton for a term of 3 years. Invited Ednil Sannon.
How are you?
Good, you?
Good.
Yes.
Have anything you'd like to say to the councilors?
Yes. My name is Ed Nelson. I live in this city for over 22 years. I want to be a constable in the city of Brockton. I want to serve my community of Brockton.
Motion to recommend favorably to the full city council.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor? All opposed? Motion is approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appointment of James Andrews of Brockton, Mass. 02301 as a constable in the city of Brockton for a term of 3 years. Invited James Andrews.
How are you?
Thanks, how are you?
Anything you'd like to say to the councilors?
Maybe just one quick thing. I'd like to thank everybody for the support. And I'm also been working with Mass Constable Service for about 5 years now with my family. And we're in Brockton, and that's what I'm hoping to be.
Motion to recommend favorably back to the full city council.
Second.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Motion passed.
Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Appointment of Juan De Los Santos of Brockton, Massachusetts, 02302 as a constable in the city of Brockton for a term of 3 years. Invited Juan De Los Santos.
How are you?
Good evening. How you do?
Good, good. You have anything you'd like to say to the councilors?
First of all, I want to thank you for having me here. I only been living in Brockton 4 years. I purchased a house 4 years ago. Live here with my son, who's on the autism spectrum. And one other thing, after listening to everybody talk here, that I want to say what a great school system you folks have. He's attending the Baker School. He's reading at a 4th grade level, and when I got him 2 years ago, he wasn't even reading at any level. He spent most of the time in the hallways in Boston. So I just want to let you know what a great special education program you have, and I want to give kudos to the Baker School. So, and I hope that you take my application, consider it as a constable.
Councilor Castro.
Thank you. Sir, good evening. Thank you for being here. I just wanted to acknowledge you served in the Army.
I did, 20 years.
20 years, and you were honorably discharged.
I was, yes.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you very much.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
I was going to vote against.
Do you have anything on the motion, Councilor?
Not on the motion.
Okay.
I was gonna,
right,
you
motion.
ruined it with the Army thing, you know, but I'm still gonna vote for you.
You must have been a Marine then, right?
Oh, the Navy.
Navy? Okay.
He'll let it slide.
We'll forgive you.
It's okay.
All right.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor? All opposed? The motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appointment of Jodell Daniel of Brockton, Massachusetts as a constable in the city of Brockton for a term of 3 years. Invited, Jodell Daniel.
How are you? Good. Do you have anything you'd like to say to the counselors?
Thanks for the invitation. I was raised in Brockton. I'm a Navy veteran, and
That gets you two right there.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Get a soft spot on this side, huh?
yeah. So I just want to make a difference in the community. I went to college in Massachusetts, and engage in the community, and I just want to serve. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second, Counselor. All right, the motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye, aye.
Maybe hands are a little higher this time. All opposed? None. All right, congratulations. Thank you.
Sir.
Thank you. Thank you for your service.
Yes.
Yeah.
Appointment of Laura Beechler of Brockton, Mass. 02301 to the Brockton Community Access Board for a 3-year term ending March 2025. Invited, Laura Beechler.
How are you?
Hi, thank you.
Anything you'd like to say to the counselors?
No, just looking forward to another opportunity here in Brockton. I'm currently on the Conservation Committee, and I'm looking forward to being more involved in the city.
Motion to recommend favorably back to the full city council.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
luck.
Thank you.
Reappointment of John Condon of Bridgewater, Mass. 02324 to the Brockton Retirement Board for a 3-year term ending March 2025. Invited, John Condon.
Good evening, councilors. I've served in the city since 1990 in the finance section, and for the last 3 years on the retirement board, and I'd be privileged to have another reappointment. I appreciate it if I got that vote. And by the way, I did serve in the Navy, so it's
Oh, Navy? Okay. Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
All right, the Navy motions and seconds.
On the motion.
On the motion, Counselor Mendez.
Yes, hi, thank you so much for being here today. So I have some questions to ask you. We don't have many of the retirement board here, so when we have the opportunity, it's good just to revisit a few things. How long have you been serving on the board?
since February of 3 years ago, since February 2019.
Oh, okay, so it hasn't been that long. Because we had the big borrowing that we had to do it last year, but you're familiar with the city finances because I found out tonight that you were Mr. Clarkson's predecessor, so hopefully you'll be able to answer some of these questions. And if you don't have the answers tonight, it's okay, then just email me. But we had the big borrowing due to the unfunded liability here in the city. So how did we perform in 2021 with the returns? Because we have the reports for 2020, but do you know how did we do last year in 2021?
Yeah, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. I think it was probably close to a 15 or an 18% return, but that's approximate. I don't know the exact amount. But it was a good year. 2021 was a good year. 2022 was a good year.
Oh, that's great. Because I know that in 2020, we were a little bit lower than the state average. So it's good to hear. And the reason, maybe I'll just file a resolve so we can bring the entire board and revisit that a little bit more. Because we just want to make sure that we're on the right track, so that way we can prevent from having to borrow another huge borrowing like we did to
Right.
cover.
Well, your liability, your unfunded liability is determined by more than simply the investment return. And your investment return ought to be based upon a structure of investments which is geared over the longer term within an acceptable range to achieve the investment assumption in your funding plan. So if you've got an investment portfolio which is too aggressively invested, it puts more risk into the system, and you may end up with a better return because you hit your more aggressive approach, but you also may end up on the far end with a much worse return. And the retirement board has a fiduciary responsibility, which is first and foremost to preserve the assets of the system so it's able to pay pensions. So our first objective is not to achieve a high rate of return is to achieve a rate of return which is equal to or in excess, slightly excess of the amount that is assumed in the funding plan. In the plan that was put together for the pension bond, that was 6.75%. So we should be gearing to hit 8% roughly, a couple percent above that, but not be looking for 15 or 20% because that would mean you were too aggressively invested. There are other aspects that affect that. One is you've got a lot of people who are coming into the system and then eventually retiring. When you estimate your liability at any time, you're expecting a certain amount of longevity for those people who are now working. And over time, those longevity estimates have been adjusted upwards because people are living longer. So earlier estimates would have been affected by not having adequately addressed, increases in longevity. And a third major factor is what happens to the payroll of the city. If you're hiring more than was anticipated at the time of the plan, or if you're granting raises which are in excess of what was assumed, or if you're hiring more expensive people as opposed to less expensive people, for example, public safety are more expensive than laborers, both in terms of their salaries and in terms of their retirement benefits, so longer on the pension system. All of those things have to be examined in connection with the assumptions that are in your plan. So I'm happy to come back. I'm pretty familiar with this chamber. I'm happy to come back to City Council at any time to give answers to how we're performing. We have an executive director whose primary responsibility that is, but I'm happy to come back and answer those questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, councilors, there's a motion properly seconded on the floor. All in favor? All opposed? The motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, councilors.
Ordered that the City Council accept the provisions of Chapter 44, subsection 53F, half of the MGL establishing stormwater as an enterprise fund, effective fiscal year 2023. Invited Pat Hill, DPW Commissioner, and Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer.
Once again, thank you, Mr. President, members of the council. Pat Hill is also here to discuss any operational issues related to this. Unlike the parking authority that has long been an established enterprise here in the city, the stormwater enterprise is a result of recent legislative actions taken by this council. As you know, the United States Environmental Protection Agency has recently promulgated regulations requiring us to take extra steps to deal with and mitigate the impacts of stormwater in our community. So as a result, you passed a fairly sweeping stormwater ordinance last legislative session that lays forth the requirements for dealing with stormwater. Within that ordinance, you also passed a fee structure that requires property owners of different levels to contribute to mitigating those impacts. And so this is the next step to create an entity within which the people who deal with stormwater will be paid. The actual projects in dealing with the stormwater will be funded. And much like the other enterprises, the excess revenues will be able to be maintained in retained earnings and be used to address some of those capital needs without the necessary costs of borrowing. The projected budget is around $786,000. That was part of your packet. So if you apply that same percentage, we do anticipate that in the first year, that enterprise will return about $94,000, $95,000 back to the general fund. Working both with our team internally, Evan Lacasse of my staff, Pat, his team, and our consultants, we do anticipate in the first full year of the assessment of this fee, the revenues should be in excess of $1.5 million. Now that figure was derived by actually going through a parcel by parcel analysis, seeing what kind of structures are on there, single family home, commercial, et cetera, in developing that estimate. So with expenses of roughly $900,000, We do anticipate that in year one, this enterprise will develop fairly significant retained earnings, and we'll be able to use that money to start addressing some of these stormwater impacts. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I think that's a pretty good overview of the financial aspect of it. And again, Pat is here if you have any operational questions on the stormwater ordinance itself.
Councilor D'Agostino, I believe you're the sponsor. Do you have anything?
Yeah, first, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Clarkson and Commissioner Hill for being here. So this, if I'm not mistaken, relates to the new $6 fee that some folks saw on their water bill. I got several calls about this when it happened. And so first, I want to thank Commissioner Hill for the time he spent walking me through this, because I called and said, okay, I'm getting calls here, what's the story? And you gave me some great information so that I could then pass that on. The one thing I wanted to ask, and just so that folks at home understand this, the establishment of a fee, if I understood it right, that was something required by the EPA, by this whole thing they laid out with licensing or permitting stormwater systems. Was that was something we were required to do?
Addressing the impacts of the stormwater, yes, was absolutely required by the EPA.
Right, but the fee part of it, if I understood right, that was something we were required to have a fee structure to pay for that with.
Counselor, so before they issued us the permit through the negotiation process, yes, they told us that we would have to establish a fee so that the enterprise could run its own.
Okay. All right. Yeah, you know, again, some folks said, hey, we just got the $15 fee, now another, and I had explained, and I just wanted to make sure that we clarified for anybody who hadn't really looked into this yet that it was part of that federal mandate. You know, it wasn't something we wanted to do, but we were required to do.
That's correct.
Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Motion to recommend favorably back to the full city council.
Second.
All those in favor? All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Commissioner. Are you? Yeah.
Ordered that the City Council of the City of Brockton petitions the Great and General Court for special legislation relating to the City of Brockton to be filed with an attested copy of this order, be and hereby is approved under the provisions of Clause 1, Section 8 of Article 2 as amended of the Articles of Amendments to the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts as follows. Petition for special law relative to bidding requirements for a certain affordable housing project in the City of Brockton. Be it enacted by the Senate and the House of Representatives in General Court assembled and by the authority of the same as follows. Provided that the General Court may reasonably vary the form and substance of this requested legislation, which shall be within the scope of the general public objectives of this petition, be it enacted by the Senate and the House of Representatives in General Court assembled and by the authority of the same as follows. Section 1, construction and development activity related to redevelopment by the Brockton Housing Authority or by a limited liability company or limited partnership controlled by the Brockton Housing Authority of the federally assisted Campello High Rise located at 1380 Main Street, Brockton, Mass. Assessor's Parcel ID Map 117034 and 117003 in the City of Brockton or any part thereof or subsequently added to parcel shall not be subject to any general or special law related to the procurement and award of contracts for the planning, design, construction management, construction, reconstruction, installation, demolition, maintenance, or repair of buildings by a public agency, but shall be subject to Section 26 to 27H inclusive of Chapter 149 of the General Laws prevailing wage. A conveyance of the project, whether it be a leasehold or fee estate, to an urban redevelopment corporation organized pursuant to Chapter 121A of the General Laws or to nonprofit state and federally tax-exempt corporation organized for the purpose of or to a limited partnership or limited liability company whose primary purpose is revitalizing the project shall be subject to Chapter 30B of the General Laws to the extent that the project is conveyed to an entity that is not owned, controlled, or managed by the Brockton Housing Authority on the date of the conveyance. Section 2, the provisions of this act shall take effect upon passage. Invited, Thomas G. Tybalt, Executive Director, Brockton Housing Authority, and Thomas L. Plouffe, Division Director of Housing Administration, Brockton Housing Authority.
Director, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Council. I believe I know you all, except for Councilwoman Tavares. Very nice to meet you. Thank you for taking the time to consider this bill. I want to thank Councilor Texera, because he's been involved in this for about 1.5 years as a board member of the Brockton Housing Authority. I certainly want to thank Councilwoman Nicastro for sponsoring it, and you and Councilman Lally, I understand, I'm sorry, for coming with us into Cambridge to take a look at some of the work that's been done in similar type projects. I heard the mayor earlier say that the city's looking under every rock for money. Well, the Housing Authority has been doing the same for quite some time. We have the same capital problems that you have, and Campello, the Campello high-rise has certainly been a challenge. It was originally built for some place in the southwestern part of the United States. So it started off in 1972 with a number of issues, and since then those have grown. So we're addressing a backlog of the needs, the capital needs of the Campbell high-rise. We started about 1 year ago, last February, and we think we can substantially alter the quality of public housing in Brockton using this program. Now, the project that we're talking about is a $150 to $200 million project, and most likely will be new construction. We've partnered with the Cambridge Housing Authority, who has done over $1 billion of like work. We did have a tour of 3 projects in Cambridge, and I'll let the councilors speak to that, but I think we're all pretty impressed with what we saw. We have hired Dietz & Company, an architect in Springfield, Mass., who have done several of these projects around the state. We've applied to the Office of the Inspector General to use the contract manager at risk method for development, allowed under Chapter 149A of the Mass General Laws, for projects of this size to ensure a quality project. Recently, as I said, we have the visit, and if the council, Councilor Nicastro and Councilor Lally would comment, I'd appreciate that, but I think it was really enlightening. We have engaged both Mass Housing and Mass Development regarding the financing of the project and hope to have the financing closed by the end of 2023. The home rule petition is simple. We're just looking for a little bit of relief from the procurement law so that we can bid this as one package. It's estimated this will save 15 to 20% on the construction part of this project. That's tens of millions of dollars that will go into the project. We believe this will be the beginning of a renovation that will go throughout the city in our public housing. And I spoke to Councilor Azak about going to Kennedy Drive, and we've heard this many times, haven't we? So we have a number of things we'll be doing, but I'm here. I'm excited to talk to you about the Campbell high-rise. I haven't been able to say that in years past. And I want to thank my assistant executive director. The position that he had on there was his former position, Tom Plouffe, who's been working closely to make sure that this program goes along. And we're here to answer any questions you may have.
Councilor, do you have anything?
I don't really have questions. I just want to impress on my colleagues, this is such a great opportunity, and the Housing Authority has worked so hard to get this far. And this is not reinventing the wheel. The Town of Brookline Housing Authority employed this same approach to get a home rule petition approved, to be able to to be able to select their own subcontractors. Am I saying this right? Yeah, select subcontractors with the skills that they needed, and kind of go around the usual bidding process that's prescribed in the state law. And it is saving them millions of dollars. It was successfully approved by the State House, and we don't see any reason why it won't be the same thing for the City of Brockton's Housing Authority. So I support this wholeheartedly. I went on the little bus and we spent a day in Cambridge in early March. We visited 3 projects of the Cambridge Housing Authority, Millers River, which was a no, Millers River was brand new.
No, rehab.
Oh, was that a rehab? Okay.
rehab, yeah.
Truman was a rehab, and Burns was a rehab.
Right.
And it was just so impressive what they've done to make these apartments like new again, new everything. And in some instances, they expanded the buildings to afford more public housing. Very impressive. The people at Cambridge Housing are wonderful consultants for Brockton Housing. I just can't say enough about this, and I do support this wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Thibault, how are you? Good. And thank you for all that you do with the Housing Authority in pro of the folks in this city. I just have a couple questions for you. How are the other high-rises doing? The other, Caffrey, Bel Air, Sullivan, and Goddard.
So all of the buildings that we have capital needs, just like your houses. Some are substantial, some are not. The high-rises are in generally good condition. In fact, we will have, hopefully, Caffrey Towers completely renovated by next year. We're doing a number of rises. Caffrey Towers was built very well. It was built for the northeast. So it wasn't Sullivan. Sullivan's been done over, so hasn't Manning Towers. Bel Air, we federalized that in 2012. We were able to put a couple $1 million into it. Campello, 20 years ago, was assessed to have a $16 million backlog in capital needs. At that time, we were getting about $1.8 million a year to address that, so you could see how long that would take. Our most recent study says that the rehab of it would be well over $100 million. So that's why I said it's most likely going to be new construction. We're going through the feasibility. We'll see how it works. But if we, so it's a unique high-rise. It's built differently than all of our other high-rises. It was under a different system, too. The system was turnkey. A developer built it and then was going to turn the keys over to the Housing Authority. In 1972, the Housing Authority Board said, no, we won't take it. Something happened over the next year, and in July of 1973, the Board of Commissioners of the Brockton Housing Authority, I wasn't around. I was around. I was probably doing a paper route there at the time. But they accepted it. I know this from the newspaper articles that I have in the archives at the Housing Authority.
So let me ask you another question, because I think I brought that up on the phone call that you and I had. Is there a rule that precludes the city from including some of the other housing complexes in this order? Meaning, so that you don't have to come back in a few months or so to, let's say, to include Kennedy Drive or some of these other ones that we might have to go back to the state to ask for relief to be able to do some things with it. Can we include the other ones onto this? I'm for this, by the way, because I live down there, and not that because I live down there, but I live in the city, so I want to see something done for the good of the people in this community. But I was just wondering if we could just, if there's anything that prevents us from including the other properties that we are, envisioning doing something with in the very near future.
All right, so it was written by an attorney. I don't know if you...
I'd be happy to speak to this, Counselor. Good evening.
Good evening.
We haven't explored that or thought about that, and we don't have plans right now to be doing the other ones. Okay. This was a long process to get to this step, to have HUD say we could do this.
Okay.
We had to prove to HUD that this property would take over 62% of its current value to rehab. And it was a long process with the, what's the place in Chicago?
That's the Special Application Center.
Special Application Center, and they reviewed it for months and months and months. So it would be premature to ask for other ones, and I don't know what would happen on Beacon Hill if we look like we're overreaching.
Okay.
So I'd rather take the bird in the hand than...
Yes, so there would be another process later on as the new ones will come into play.
Yes.
Mr. Thibault, Tommy actually...
I think his answer's right. I like your idea.
Because
lawyers are cautious.
He promised us that we're going to get Kennedy Drive done real soon. So hopefully
We
we'll
will be
get that done.
doing, on another, so Kennedy Drive is a state development, this is a federal development. The state is the poor cousin to the federal program, and the federal program is the poor cousin to mixed housing. And that's where we're going. We're going to a new world where the funding is higher so that we can maintain the properties. Eventually, and the plan is, and this is something that is in our plan, is to federalize Kennedy Drive and then bring that into this same program.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Minicello, followed by Counselor Azak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nice to see you, Mr. Tebow, Mr. Plouffe. Is it my understanding that any money saved are not going to be going into anyone's profit, but will be reinvested in stretching the renovation budget so that the units will be more improvements will be done to the units by the savings from the method of accounting, so to speak?
That is exactly right. So the method is, it's still a prevailing wage job. So the men and women who work on this job will get paid their prevailing wage. What it does away with is some of the bureaucracy. We'll be borrowing a tremendous amount of money for construction. Any delays is going to cost us millions of dollars in interest. That will delay, get rid of some of that. It will allow us to specify a number of the sub-trades to go to net zero admissions, as we spoke earlier. So it saves on the bureaucratic part of bidding in the state of Massachusetts and allows more money to go into the project, so the quality of the project is better.
Yes, so that's a win-win for the residents, obviously. So their units will be beautified better than perhaps if the old, let's call it non-efficient method was followed.
Yes.
Great. All for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Azak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you for being here. And it's always exciting when, good things are happening, and definitely if we're improving the lives of our, elderly, and this is definitely something that's needed. So my question is, statement question. Home rule petitions are not quick. It's a process. What can we do to kind of move it along? So, especially with costs rising, whether it's gasoline, I'm sure, construction material. So what can we do to help move this quickly? I know Attorney Plouffe, I don't know if there's anything we can do on our end to help you get this moving a little quicker.
If it passes tonight, and if next week somebody moves for reconsideration, that can be signed 2 days earlier. Reconsideration hopes it does not prevail, so the mayor could sign it 2 days earlier. We've spoken with our State House delegation about moving this as soon as they get it. We've taken those steps.
Perfect.
Councilor, thank you.
Thank you, thank you. And we look forward to the few, this is just the beginning of hopefully other good things happening to some of our housing, elderly housing in the city. So thank you. I know this is a total, you're taking one building completely down, correct? And then they're completely coming down?
We're in a feasibility study, which is a significant feasibility study. We have to prove it to our lenders. But one of the projects that has been suggested is to build a building that would house the people who would live in the A building. So build that new, move everybody out of the A building into the new building and tear that down. The A building is one that fronts on Main Street. And then build the second building, or third or fourth. There could be more than 2 buildings. Again, we're in feasibility. We're trying to develop the best way to use the property, and then move those people from that tower in and tear that down. That's probably the easiest way to do it, because you have the less, you have less impact on the people's lives. If you do rehab, you have to move them out, move them back in, which we do. We're doing right now at Caffrey Towers, but it would be best to do that, yes.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Teixeira.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Tebow, and thank you, Mr. Plouffe, to be here for us. My question is, with the, I think you did answer, with the tenants. So when we take that building 8 down, do we have a place to place the tenants?
So we have to have a relocation plan. In fact, in the budget right now, there's about $900,000 for relocation. So the first thing we would do is say to any of the residents, and some of them want to now, do you want to move to one of our other places? So there would be a number of people would move. There'll be attrition. People move out all the time. And then there'd be the people, again, if we do it the way I just explained, we would leave them in their apartment and we would move them into their new unit when that became available. So we think we have that down. If we had to do the renovation in the building, again, we have to, the people have rights. We move them, we offer them many different things and make sure that they are impacted as little as possible.
Okay, the second question is, I know the Campbell High Rise, it's 10 storage. The new building is going to be what, 4 storage?
It probably won't be as tall. We would prefer it to be more spread out on the property. It's also less expensive. Once you get over a mid-rise size, it becomes a lot more expensive, so budget might have something to do with that also.
All right, thank you for your question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Counselor.
Motion to recommend favorably back to the full city council.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor? All opposed? The motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ordered that the City Council authorizes the acceptance and expenditure of the total grant funds in the amount of $14,930 from Commonwealth of Massachusetts Executive Office of Public Safety, $14,930, to City of Brockton Fire Department Fiscal Year 22 Community Safe Program Fund, $11,275, City of Brockton Fire Department the Senior Safe Program Fund, $3,655. These grant funds will be used for the Fire Safety Education Program. Invited Brian Nardelli, Fire Chief, and Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer.
Chief, thanks for hanging in there.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, councilors.
Good evening.
This is a, we come back every year for the acceptance of this. This is a grant that the City of Brockton has worked with for a number of years. This grant is actually 27 years old. And these funds, again, the 11,000 and change will go towards the student portion of this, and the other 3,000 will go towards the Senior Safe program, which is only about 7 years old. So this funding has gone up because of the Senior Safe program. One of the interesting things about this grant is 27 years ago, when this was enacted, the Brockton Fire Department was on the forefront at the time, getting in and working with the kids. In that 27 years, they've seen fire fatalities of children reduced by 78%, which is an astounding number. 7 years ago, when they started the Senior Safe program, the interesting part about that is the Brockton Fire Department, Captain Hendrigan, who's the acting Deputy Chief of Operations, was a lieutenant at the time. He played a role in the development of that program. So in Brockton, the City of Brockton, the Brockton Fire Department were in the forefront of this at both points. So I would be willing to answer any questions.
Councilor Nicastro.
Good evening. Thank you. Just give us a little idea of how you're going to spend these funds.
So these funds are what pays for materials, what pays for potential overtime for the trainers to go into the classrooms. A lot of times what happens, counselors, is Lieutenant Dan Santry, who is the safe officer right now, he handles a lot of this on his own. Part of this also goes to our Fire Prevention Day every year in October as well. So part of those funds go to that. Senior Safe, we work with the Council on Aging, and that works out well. Christina Long is our contact over there, and that's moving forward. It's been difficult, obviously, the last couple of years with that because of the COVID pandemic, and they haven't really been wanting to be around our seniors, or our seniors haven't been able to be around us. One of the things that was really interesting, Captain Weeks, when he did this a couple of years ago during the pandemic, they actually made a video for the school kids. So part of their curriculum became this video. It was actually pretty awesome with like animation and stuff, because this grant services K1 and 3. So you're looking at some very young, just getting into school, to even third graders, which at that point can be, keeping their attention. So Lieutenant Santry, who now heads up the program, I've gotten astounding reviews from teachers that my wife knows, and a number of different people reaching out to her. So we're heading on the right course. But this goes mainly to a lot of materials and different things of that nature.
It's an amazing result, a 78% reduction.
It is.
It's really something special.
So I think one of the things that's really, really interesting and cool in a lot of ways, there's obviously a curriculum that's set up. We don't just go in there and throw stuff at the wall and see what works with kids. One of the things that's really interesting is they start off with, one of the big things is find your safe area. Where is your meetup point outside the house? And I have to tell you, not just in the city of Brockton, but people I know that have been involved in the SAFE program in other communities, their K, first and third graders hound the parents all the time. Lieutenant so-and-so said we had to do this. Lieutenant so-and-so said we had to do that. So it resonates. I think it also gives the children in the classroom a break from the regular day-to-day activities and academics they're dealing with, and they see something different. So it immediately kind of clicks with them. So the results speak for themselves with this. It really does.
Thank you, Chief.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Motion to recommend favorably back to the full city council.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor? All opposed? Motion's passed.
Thank you, Chief.
Councilors, we've reached the end of our agenda. Is there any moments of
Council's recognition.
I almost said personal privilege. I'm getting old. Councilor Azak.
Listen, I've always dreamed of having an editorial, so yes. So, first of all, I would like to wish a very happy 100th birthday to Mrs. Flora Dwyer, who celebrated her 100th birthday last week. Her family had a beautiful celebration for her, and myself with Mayor Sullivan and Senator Brady presented her with citations. So on behalf of the City Council, I presented her a citation. So we wish her many, many good years ahead, but she's an adorable lady. Secondly, please remember this Friday, March 25th, is the Greek flag raising. The ceremony will be held here at City Hall at 3:30 p.m. So that's Greek flag raising on March 25th. Ordinance Committee, we will be having a meeting on Tuesday, March 29th at 6 p.m. here in Council Chambers. And lastly, the Brockton Cultural Affairs and Tourism Expo of 2022 is this Saturday, March 26th, from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at North Baptist Church, located at 899 North Main Street. This event is free to the community. Everybody's all are welcome. It's a lot of good information, a lot of good things happening in the city of Brockton. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor. If there's nobody else, we are adjourned.